Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolong Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolong is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, she was a trailblazing attorney, the first black female prosecutor in Kentucky. But on August 5th, 1965, she was brutally murdered. Who killed Alberta Jones? Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my fascinating co-host, Alice.
Oh, thanks, Brett. Whenever I hear the word fascinating, I think of fascinators, which I think there are not enough of. Really? You were?
Yes!
Well, we don't wear enough of fascinators in our society currently, only to watch, a royal wedding that happens every couple years.
That was when I learned of the existence of fascinators. I didn't know what a fascinator was before
I'm not going to lie. I think most people probably learned about it at one of the royal weddings. But Did you know fascinator is literally derived from the Latin term to fascinate, and so they are actually tied because it's enthralling. It's someone who's enthralling, and I guess the art, because it's like art, that you're wearing on your head. I mean, it serves no practical purpose. It's really just decoration, but it's beautiful.
It's like an impractical hat. Or something.
It is an impractical hat, but do we really need hats to be practical anymore these days anyways?
No. I wish we wore more hats. I miss hats. I blame John F. Kennedy.
Baseball caps or fedoras?
No, fedoras. The story is, and I don't know if this is true, this is probably apocryphal, is that hats went out of style when JFK did not wear a hat at his inaugural address. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard.
That's fascinating, Brett. I'm taking it all the way around.
Oh, yes. That's why this podcast works so well, everybody.
And I think maybe we're trying a little hard back to that person who said we had no chemistry.
That's true. It's true. We're trying to cover it up. But I tell you what, Alice, we have a fascinating case today.
We really do.
And really, I think this may be my favorite case that we've done.
She is my favorite person we've talked about, and obviously it is a sad case that she was murdered, and we'll talk about that. But I'm really excited about this case because, Brett, I'm so excited we get to highlight her life. She is a truly fascinating trailblazer, like you said, and I don't think enough people know her story.
I think that is definitely true. I was shocked, really surprised when I was, looking for other people's coverage of this case to steal from. And there were just very few podcasters who had covered this case. And I was really kind of surprised by that. And I think people don't know about this case. And I'll just say, if you hear this episode and you're a podcaster and you want to cover her, feel free to use anything we say. We're going to put up some resources on the website you can go to. I do want to highlight one article that we're going to refer to a lot in this case. When I was looking through various resources we could use, there was a medium.com article entitled "Another Black Woman Murdered in Louisville." And the article is in a lot of ways about Breonna Taylor, but it ties in the case we're going to talk about today, the murder of Alberta Jones. And I will just tell you, I read a Washington Post article on this case. I read a New York Times article on this case. Neither one of those even approached the quality of this medium.com article. So I hope that if you listen to this and you think it's interesting, you'll take a moment to go check that out because it's really good. And what's great about it is it cites its sources very well, and it enabled us to go back and find a lot of the original articles in this case and read those and sort of tease out some information that really I had not seen anywhere about this case. And this is an interesting one for several reasons. Number one, as Alice said, the person we're going to talk about is an amazing person. We're going to talk about how she's an amazing person, but frankly, we're barely even going to scratch the surface of her accomplishments. A lot of people complain about true crime because people say, every victim lit up the room and they were beautiful and they were amazing. And look, I think it's fine to say that about victims because they're victims. Like, no need not to be nice about them. But Alberta Jones actually was an amazing person, as you're going to see. The second reason I think this one's interesting is because this one should have been solved 50 years ago, and it certainly can be solved now, but time's running out. Memories are fading, people are dying, and we're going to talk about some of the people who've died who are important in this case. So if we're going to solve this definitively, we really need somebody to talk and talk now. So I hope if you live in Louisville, frankly, if you live anywhere and you hear this and it strikes a chord, that you'll report that to the Louisville police because this case can be solved. I think that's probably enough introduction. Let's go ahead and dive in. Like we said, we are talking about Alberta Odell Jones, and we're going to start with someone else. Long before she became a professor at Bellarmine University, Dr. Lee Remington was a first-year law student at the University of Louisville, and she was walking to class one day when a picture on the wall caught her eye. It was a black and white photograph of a group of people, all men, save one, a young African-American woman, smiling, dressed sharply, obviously happy. Remington would pass that photograph every day, and she began to wonder who this woman was. She'd soon learn that her name was Alberta Jones, and her story, an amazing one.
So let's talk about her. Alberta Odell Jones was born in Louisville, Kentucky on November 12th, 1930. She came of age as the Civil Rights era was beginning, and she would personally witness its progress and the roadblocks it had to overcome. Her high school, Louisville Central, was still segregated when she graduated in 1948. She began her college studies at Louisville Municipal College for Negroes, but in 1951, she found herself at the University of Louisville when the two schools merged that year. Despite what must have been a difficult time and a jarring transition, Alberta graduated third in her class. Clearly, she was a bright young lady, but she wasn't satisfied with that. She became the first African American to attend the University of Louisville Law School before transferring to the prestigious Howard University School of Law in Washington, D.C. in her second year. And in 1958, she graduated fourth in her class at Howard School of Law.
I'm really we're going to harp on this a lot because this is just all impressive, right? It's impressive, her academic accomplishments and what she was overcoming during that period. She's not only African American, she's a woman. And both of those in the 1950s would have been things that would have made all of this much more difficult, especially to be, at the University of Louisville as it's integrating. Those of you who know your history know, this was a rough time, and the people who were coming to these schools that had previously been all white, they were not welcomed with open arms by any stretch of the imagination. Sometimes you think this is Kentucky, it's not the deep South, but as we're going to talk about later, the problems of segregation and racism were not just limited to deep South states. This was a problem in Louisville. Obviously, segregation was in place, and she would have found it incredibly difficult And then she has to do her studies as well, and yet she's graduating third in her class. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, I doubt those professors were giving her an easy time either.
Certainly not. And just to give you guys a little bit of a contemporary to Alberta, many of you may have heard of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and know her story of how difficult it was for her to attend law school as a woman in the 50s. So Ginsburg graduated from law school in 1959, so just a year after Alberta. And here, obviously, Alberta is an African-American female, so she is just really in a class of her own.
Yeah, Ruth Bader Ginsburg spoke at my law school graduation. My law school, which has the distinction of having her very briefly there before one of the deans told her that women did not belong in the law. So she left Harvard and went to Columbia. Am I making that up? Columbia, where she graduated, but,
where she graduated first in her class, by the way.
Right. So that was kind of embarrassing. She made a little joke about that at our graduation, so... But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff people were facing, and that's Harvard in Boston, Massachusetts, right? And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a woman. Alberta is both a woman and she's black at a very difficult time. So she graduates fourth in her class. She probably could have done anything she wanted, but she decided to come back to Louisville and to serve the people there. And in doing that, she became the first black woman admitted to the Kentucky bar. There's some great articles about her in the Louisville Courier-Journal. At one point, somebody tells her that she's going to be the first black woman admitted to the bar, and she says something along the lines of, well, if I'd known that, I would have dressed better. I mean, she looks great, but still.
That's awesome.
They took her picture and everything.
Kind of shows you her spunk, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody told her once that, she was black and she was a woman. She already had 2 strikes against her. And she said something along the lines of, I've seen plenty of people hit home runs with 2 strikes, so I think I'll be fine. I mean, she was definitely somebody who was ready to fight. And she opened her own law office on West Broadway in Louisville, Kentucky in 1959. And as is often the case, her first few clients were people she knew from the neighborhood. And this included a young boxer who was ready to make the move from amateur to professional. Alberta negotiated his first contract, and that contract, signed Cassius Clay, now hangs in the Muhammad Ali Museum in Louisville, which, once again, not only is she this awesome lawyer, but being a woman in the sports world like that, even now, is difficult, and she's earning the trust of people like Muhammad Ali so that she can negotiate their contract. She was also very active in her community and in the ongoing civil rights movement. She was somebody who was signing up voters. She was someone who was doing education drives on issues that mattered to the people in her community. In 1963, she attended the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, which is perhaps most famous for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech.
I mean, I'm getting tingles hearing her story because she's obviously a phenomenal woman, but she's also just in the midst of such rich history as well. And she's not just in that part of history, she is actively taking part in it. In fact, Brett already mentioned Alberta ran voter drives in Louisville as well as voter education seminars because she wasn't just trying to sign up people and tell them how to vote. In fact, she was very against that. She said that people needed to be educated and to vote what they thought was right. And her efforts helped to work a pro-civil rights revolution in city government. As a leader in the Independent Voters Association, Alberta helped to oust the anti-civil rights Democratic Party establishment and elect Republicans who supported civil rights reforms. Now, with a new mayor and a new city council, it was time to appoint a new city attorney, and you guessed it, Alberta was the pick. This made her the first woman of any race to serve in that position. A year later, in February of 1965, she moved on to become a prosecutor. Now, again, she is breaking barriers because she was both the first woman and the first person of color to hold that position in Louisville. Her caseload consisted primarily of domestic violence cases, protecting other women from violent crime. Just as a woman who practices criminal law, I can say it's very powerful when the victims look and see someone who looks like them helping to defend them. And here she is being the first woman and first woman of color in that position. She is riding high on life. I mean, you can just see the opportunity and a bright future brimming from this young firecracker of a lawyer. But just 6 months after becoming a prosecutor, she would lose her life, murdered on a dark Louisville night.
If you're looking to streamline your audio advertising buys and maximize your revenue, look no further than Triton Digital's programmatic audio advertising exchange, A2X. The private exchange consists of only licensed broadcasters and top-tier internet radio publishers, assuring the quality inventory and brand safety you can trust. Visit www.tritondigital.com to learn more.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not hard to imagine Alberta and what she would have been if she weren't murdered. And it's really hard to put any kind of limit on that. I mean, you can imagine her being a congressperson, a senator, a governor. I mean,
a Supreme Court justice.
A Supreme Court justice, absolutely. I mean, she was on her way, and she cared about serving the public. And if she had wanted to, with her education and her background, I mean, she could have gone to a big city and, made a lot of money. I mean, she could have done that. She could have been a trailblazer that way if she'd wanted to. But that's not what she wanted to do. She wanted to come back to Louisville and make it a better place. And you can see that in this. I mean, she's going to be a prosecutor. She's going to prosecute domestic violence cases, which are some of the toughest cases to deal with because of the emotions that are involved, how difficult it is to make those cases, how oftentimes your victims are deciding at the last moment. They don't want to prosecute it. I mean, this is a tough job that she's taking on, but it just fits with her character so perfectly. So we're going to talk about the timeline in this case, which I think is really important. Sometimes timelines, we spend 5 minutes on them. Sometimes we spend an entire episode on them. This one's going to be more like the latter, because I think what happened the night that she was killed is really important. And one reason it's important is because it has changed so much over the years. And one timeline is from initial reporting in 1965 when the murder was committed. Another is from reporting in 1978, 13 years later. And the strangest part about this is the timelines both come from the same person, and that person's story has changed so much over the years. And if you've only read the Washington Post story or the New York Times story, you won't actually see that. And they sort of just adopt that later story of what happened. We are going to tell you both sides of this, both stories. We'll highlight when they're different, and we can decide for ourselves when this is all finished, are those changes significant? Do they matter? Or is it just changes in memory over time? But let's start Thursday, August 5th, 1965. And it's already late when we start this story. It's between 10 and 11 p.m. It's the night of the murder, and Alberta is at home with her mother and sister, who she lives with, reading an article on the JFK assassination. As she's reading this article, she made a comment to her sister that she hoped she was never assassinated, which is sort of a dark, foreboding foreshadowing of what's to come.
And my understanding is that comment was kind of cheeky, kind of joking, kind of the spunkster that she is. But of course, it took on a lot more, dark meaning after this night.
Yes, it absolutely did. And her sisters even said that in the years that followed, how that stuck with her afterwards. But in any event, so she makes this statement to her sister, and despite the late hour, a phone call comes in for Alberta, and this is very unusual. Ordinarily, Alberta would not expect a phone call this late, and she certainly wouldn't respond to it, but the woman on the other line is a lady named Gladys Wickoff. Now, she's an acquaintance from the community, somebody that everybody knows. She owns a beauty salon, so you can imagine she's one of the sort of cultural community touchstones in Louisville, and she's calling for Alberta. Everybody agrees that Gladys called that night, but exactly what Gladys was calling about is in dispute. So, according to what the police told the Louisville Courier-Journal the day after the murder, so this is August 1965, Gladys wanted Alberta to come try on a wig she had ordered when, quote, it was convenient. Now, I think you can already see like how this is very unusual, right? It's 11 o'clock on a Thursday. It's probably not convenient for Alberta to come in at that time and try on a wig. And you got to wonder, I mean, Gladys, is she the most hardworking person in America that she wants Alberta to come in and, take care of this transaction that could be taken care of any other time? But apparently she does.
Note that both of them probably are working the next day. Gladys's salon's probably open on a Friday, and certainly a prosecutor works on a Friday.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got to imagine Alberta is pretty exhausted. She's probably pretty close to going to sleep. And like you said, I mean, Gladys is going to be working all day the next day, and yet she's calling Alberta about trying on a wig. Now, by 1978, this story has changed. In an article published that year, it was reported that Gladys called about a lawsuit she wanted to file. A little confusing about who she wants to sue. It's either against another beautician who she's having some sort of dispute with, or it's more against either the city or the state in reference to different standards that are being applied to white and black beauticians. So you can imagine how this would probably happen a lot, where you have regulations and the people who are using those regulations are doing so to discriminate against African American beauticians. So yeah, perfectly legal for you to do this. Segregation is over, but we're sort of on the back end going to hurt you by using these regulations to harm your business. And that's what it was about.
Just of those two stories, the latter one is more believable because that would make more sense why this woman, Alberta, who has worked her whole life for equality, equal treatment of blacks and whites, would leave her house at such a late hour when she's probably exhausted from a day of work and has to go to work the next morning to help out a friend file this righteous lawsuit, right? The fitting the wig seems a little bit strange. I mean, maybe she had a wig that, burst into flames that day and she needed a wig for work the next day, but unlikely because she had ordered a wig. It wasn't like an emergency wig.
Yeah, and you could imagine, I mean, if you want to give Gladys the benefit of the doubt, how could this have come up? Maybe she calls Alberta about the lawsuit and then in passing says, oh, and while you're here, we can fit that wig. Or I'll fit that wig for you, and while we're doing that, I'll tell you about this lawsuit I want to file, right? I mean, that's sort of I think the most charitable way you can interpret this from Gladys's point of view.
But it's wildly different stories, which is very strange.
It is wildly different stories, and it's not the story that Gladys is telling the police, at least not the story that she's telling the police that they are then reporting to the Courier-Journal. Maybe they're trying to hold this back for a reason. Maybe this has something to do with what happened and the police didn't want to share this. That's a possibility as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But whatever the truth is, the story that's consistent with what Alberta's mother and sister remember is the latter one, that this was not about a wig, this was about a lawsuit.
Right, and that is what they would later report. Whatever the reason for Gladys's call to Alberta, not only did she want to talk to Alberta, she wanted to talk to her that night. It was that important. This is where the story veers widely from what Gladys originally said. According to her sister, Alberta told Gladys that she didn't do that kind of legal work anymore now that she was a prosecutor. Gladys responded that Alberta was, quote, uppity now that she'd gotten a position of power. Now, this bothered Alberta so much that she decided to go out despite the late hour and meet with Gladys. Alberta's mother asked her if Alberta wanted her mom to go with her, but she actually declined. She said that she'd be okay.
And let me just say, it makes sense that this response from Alberta, right? That she's a prosecutor, so she can't do that kind of work anymore. I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she can't. She represents the state or the, municipality now. She doesn't have the ability to file lawsuits on behalf of private parties.
Yeah, whatever Gladys might have thought, she's not, it's not that she can't do anything for Gladys anymore. It's that she's actually prohibited from doing it. So it makes sense that she would say that Gladys hits her with this uppity comment, which apparently bothered her. And I've got to imagine what Alberta's thinking is, well, I need to at least go talk to her about this. I can connect her with somebody. I can make sure she can get the right representation. I don't want to have a bad reputation in the neighborhood. Alberta's worked really hard to build up her reputation. She has a lot of influence. She has a lot of things she still wants to accomplish. The last thing she needs is for Gladys to be telling everybody who comes into the beauty salon that Alberta, she's forgotten where she came from. And so I can imagine she was like, okay, fine, I will come out there. And that's what she does.
And it also makes sense that her mom would say, goodness, it's, 10, 11 at night. Do you want me to go with you? And from what I can tell of Alberta so far, she's not afraid of anything. She's a strong, independent woman. She's like, Mom, I got this. I'm just going to go talk to a friend. So that also that also rings true to me, that she would say, no, Mom, you stay home. You go to bed. It's late. Now, Alberta drove her car, a rental she had while her Thunderbird was in the shop getting worked on, to the salon on West Broadway to meet with Gladys. She met Gladys there and, depending on the story, either tried on the wig or discussed the lawsuit with her. But we do believe she went to Gladys's salon. Now, she's there for a while because 1:30 a.m., now this is according to Gladys's first story, the 1965 version. After the wig was fitted, the two of them drove to a restaurant on 4th and River Road and had sandwiches. They then went back to Gladys's house, which I'm pretty sure actually doubled as her salon, and talked for a while before Alberta left.
And can I just say, this is where the story gets really weird to me. Because you got Alberta, it's already late. She didn't want to go at all, but she's going to humor her friend and come out here and talk to her. It's now 1:30, so at the latest, depending on the story, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 11. Let's assume it was 11 when she left. That's 2.5 hours later, on a Thursday night. And Alberta's 34. She's not as old as I am, but I would be exhausted at this point.
I'm 35. I'm exhausted thinking about it. And honestly, it's a little bit strange because if she's just going there to to either fit a wig, which shouldn't take that long, or to talk her down from this whole uppity comment, either way, I don't think the point was to go hang out with her. And if they are hungry at 1:30, they are at Gladys's house. Why not just break open the fridge, whatever's in the fridge? I've had plenty of friends come over and we start talking and it gets late and we pull out, cheese and crackers and wine or something like that, rather than leave in order to go to a diner, which there probably are not that many open at that hour. So that is kind of a strange fact right there.
I mean, Louisville's a happening place. I've been to Louisville before. I don't know how happening it is, but it's a nice town. If you live in Louisville, I like Louisville. Nice town. Kentucky Derby. Awesome. But in 1965, I mean, right now, there aren't that many places open at 1:30. I mean, maybe in 1965, this is a different world, and that was common. But
I don't know, Brett.
If it were 1:30 in the morning and I was hungry, I wouldn't think, well, let's drive and go get something to eat. That just wouldn't even cross my mind.
No, and we can certainly say where we live, nothing would be open at 1:30.
Nothing's open at 10:30.
Yeah, nothing's open at 10:30. It's a fair point. Now, this part of the story, we talk about how strange it is. Well, it gets stranger because this story shifted wildly in 1978 version of Gladys's story. According to the later story that Gladys told, Gladys and Alberta sat in the parking lot of the restaurant and drank lemonade and ate shrimp when a carload of young men hassled them. After this, Alberta began to feel dizzy, so they returned to Gladys's shop. But despite the way she felt and the fact that it was so late, Gladys said at this point she styled Alberta's wig before she left for the night. There's more to the story, but let me stop here real quick. This is strange because, like you said, whether it was 10 or 11 that Alberta went over to Gladys's salon, and if she went over there to fit the wig, why was it not fit yet at 1:30? Why did they go out and eat shrimp and drink lemonade before fitting the wig? You think they'd get the wig fit and then go eat. We've worked so hard fitting the wig, let's go eat. They go eat first and then style the wig. And there's no mention of why Alberta feels dizzy. Presumably she's not sick that night, otherwise she wouldn't have come out in the first place. And there's no clear indication that the lemonade was spiked or that the shrimp was bad or what would make her feel dizzy.
And this is weird again, like you were saying. Several things that are weird about this. Number one, before it was sandwiches, now it's shrimp. To me, that's a big difference. There's a big difference between shrimp and sandwiches. Like, I don't think
Those
you
are different
confuse
types
that.
of, well, those are different types of restaurants too, right? A
Right.
restaurant deli doesn't typically serve shrimp. I'm thinking like a basket of shrimp, like Popeyes isn't the right. Who has shrimp?
Like Captain D's. Captain
Yes,
D's
like
has shrimp.
which is a very different place than, like a Subway.
Yeah, and even if it was just a diner, I just don't think they'd be serving shrimp at 1:30 in the morning. I mean, maybe they were. I mean, maybe we're focusing on things that don't matter, but it's weird. It's weird, number one, that it's so different. It's so different. It's not, we had club sandwiches and then, oh, no, it was turkey, or we had pizza. No, it was a calzone, right? Like, or, yeah, we had pasta. Oh, no, we had spaghetti. Like, it's just, we were there for sandwiches that we ate at the restaurant, and then it's, no, we went and got shrimp and sat in the parking lot, which makes a little bit more sense because I can imagine the restaurant closing. Then we have this carload of young men hassling them, which also seems like a very important detail that maybe you would have included in the 1965 version. Now, once again, it's possible that this all was kind of hold back evidence stuff, and the police didn't want people to know there was a carload of young men because they were still trying to identify the young men. That's all possible, but it is so weird that it's coming from Gladys, and I also don't want to let this go because I think Alice made a really good point. Number one, this is the 1978 story. In the 1978 story, Alberta's coming over there to talk about a lawsuit, not to get her wig fitted or anything, but the wig comes back. The wig is back into the story because now, after all this, after it's gotten so late and Alberta does not feel well, she's coming back and spending yet more time with Gladys to get her wig fixed. Why? And like you said, why not do that when she first got there? If that was part of this, if they were doing, like I said, discussing the lawsuit and fitting the wig, why are we doing this now afterwards?
Right. And it's so late that if it were 1:30 and I'm not feeling well, I'm pretty sure I would just say, I'm going home. See you tomorrow. I'll catch you later. But it's 1:30 in the morning. I'm feeling dizzy. I'm going home. But that's not what happens. In fact, at 1:45 a.m., a convenience store clerk reports that a woman matching Alberta's description entered the store to buy some soft drinks. He would later see her talking to two black men outside. Now, notice that this little tidbit in the timeline comes from someone other than Gladys.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, does this really fit with the story that Gladys has told? That they've already gone to a restaurant, that they've had lemonade, that she's hung out at her house, that it's gotten so late. I mean, would Alberta at this point really stop to pick up a Coke at the convenience store? Maybe she would. I mean, like I said, I feel like with cases like that, or cases like this, you start to pick apart every little thing and try and figure out every little detail and how it fits. And maybe some things do fit and they don't fit, and they do matter and they don't matter. But it just feels weird.
But notice that the clerk reports that Alberta, or someone who looked like Alberta, bought some soft drinks, not just a Diet Coke, not just a Coke. You can imagine maybe someone's driving home, they're tired, I'm going to stop for some caffeine. But no, she didn't stop for one drink. Of course, the clerk may have been imprecise in their story, but the story here is that it's some soft drinks, indicating maybe buying it for more than one person, maybe for her and Gladys. But why would she do that? They already got lemonade. Just 30 minutes after that sighting at 2:15 a.m., a local family will later report to police that around this time, they heard screams. When they looked outside, they saw two black men forcing a woman into a car. The screams had stopped, but they saw a man pick up something from the street and get into the car with three other men and drive away. Now notice these last two timeline pieces that I gave you came from people other than Gladys, and they actually fit somewhat well together in terms of timing and who is reported with Alberta.
Yeah, and I think another interesting thing to notice about this is we've got at least two men, as many as four men involved in this, which I think is important.
I think five. As many as five other men?
As many as five men. Because there's three men in the car, right? There's three men in the car. There's somebody picking something up. There's two men forcing somebody into a car. It's hard to say exactly how many people there are. I mean, maybe there's six, but there's a lot. There's at least, 3, 4, 5 men. And as we've said before, it's really hard to keep a secret. And really hard And I think this goes to what we were talking about when at the very beginning of this episode. There are a lot of people who know about this. There are a lot of people who know the details about this, which means there's probably still people out there who could tell us exactly what happened. And I think that's an important thing to remember and another reason to get this story out there. In any event, this is the last sighting of Alberta alive. The next day is Friday, August 6th. It's 7 a.m. Alberta's mother and sister wake up the next morning, and Alberta is nowhere to be found. She obviously had not come home that night. I say that Alberta's mother woke up. In fact, she had never really gone to sleep. She'd been worried about her daughter all night, and she lay in bed waiting on her to return. Now, the one thing they did know was that Alberta had been going to Gladys's house. So they do exactly what you would expect them to do. They call Gladys, but Gladys doesn't answer. Her daughter answers. And when Flora Shanklin, who is Alberta's sister, asks her where Gladys is, she's told that she's not home, that she's gone downtown to take care of some business. Now remember, this is 7 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, and this immediately strikes Flora as strange. It's 7 in the morning, and even though it is a work day, there aren't any businesses that are going to be open at that hour, much less earlier. So you have to imagine that Gladys has decided to leave and go downtown to do business sometime before this. Her home, and we're going to have a map on the website, her home and her salon are in the middle of Louisville. So it's not like this is a long drive for her and she needed to leave early to make sure she was there when everything opened at 8. She's not home because she's, quote, taking care of some business.
That's very interesting. Do we know how old her daughter is?
We don't. I haven't been able to find anything.
Yeah, I haven't either. Down. It's just interesting. Clearly a daughter who lived at home. But then again, it's possible that Gladys's daughter is an adult. It is very strange for her to be gone so early, especially when, by Gladys's own story, she was out and about as late as 1:30 or 2 in the morning. So this is just about 5 hours later. I can stay up late. I'm a night owl, but I'm usually not then up 4 or 5 hours later running around doing business.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's a strange thing. Now, look, there's a whole question of, are there coincidences in true crime? A lot of people say there are no coincidences in true crime. And I think there is some truth to that. I think oftentimes what looks like a coincidence is a clue. This could be a clue, or maybe it is a coincidence. Maybe Gladys just doesn't want to talk to anybody. Maybe she's asleep because she did stay up late, and she told her daughter, just tell him I went to take care of some business downtown. And that's what she said, and that's why this has stuck out for so long. Remember, it's only important because Alberta was killed. If Alberta hadn't been killed, this is a statement that nobody would ever care about or think about, right? And you think about all the things you do and say in your life every day that, if something were to happen, might become important, might become evidence used against you in a future trial. I mean, I just think about my Google search history doing this podcast. Man, hopefully nobody near me is ever murdered, or it'll look really bad for me. But it's kind of like that. This could just be a coincidence, not a significant thing, but it certainly struck them as unusual at the time, and they decided to go ahead and report Alberta missing to the police. At about the same time, they're calling the police. It's around 10:30 a.m., and there are some boys who are going down the riverbank in Louisville. If you know where Louisville is, it's North Kentucky, about as far North Kentucky as you can get. And there's the Ohio River, which separates Louisville from both Ohio and Indiana. And these boys are walking along the Ohio River, and they find a body. The body is fully clothed, but is not wearing any shoes. They obviously call the police. The police bring this body in. They then receive the call from the family and kind of put 2 and 2 together. We have a missing woman, and here we have a body of a woman. And her body is actually later identified by her former law partner as Alberta Jones. Interestingly, to the extent Alberta was wearing a wig that day, it is never found. Her shoes are found further up the river at the Shawnee Golf Course. And given all these factors, the police begin to suspect that the Sherman-Minton Bridge, which connects Louisville to Ohio, is involved.
An interesting thing is we hear of bodies being dumped in bodies of water. because it is a good way to hide a body. If you're out at sea, it could take a very long time for the body to wash back up to shore. It could be eaten by, water animals before it's discovered. But here, the Ohio River and Shawnee Park are well traversed. I mean, it's by a golf course. And so you would think if someone is dumping a body here, or if the body somehow ends up there, the purpose is not to hide the body for long, because it will likely be discovered as it was here. I mean, to be discovered within about 3 hours of a missing person reporting is remarkably fast. You can do better if you were trying to hide a body.
Yeah, you certainly can. And before I get mean emails, the Sherman-Minton Bridge connects Kentucky to Indiana. So Sherman-Minton Bridge, though, is the bridge that's going to become important as we talk about this case. So October 7th, the next day, police find Alberta's car on the 3100 block of Dale Park Terrace in Louisville. And what they find inside tells a lot of this story. There is a large amount of blood found in the back of the car, as were bits of brick, a knife, and Alberta's denture. She had a denture plate that was missing when her body was found. And these factors, combined with the autopsy, would lead police to believe that what happened here is that Alberta was beaten with a brick until she was unconscious. And then at that point, she was thrown, still alive, from the Sherman-Minton Bridge. Alberta's ultimate cause of death was determined to be drowning. So even though she'd been beaten quite severely and there was a lot of blood and a brick was used and she'd been beaten so badly that there are pieces of the brick still in her car, she was not dead when she went into the water. She died, ultimately, of drowning. There were fingerprints found in the car, which were sent to the FBI for testing.
About 2 months later, on October 8th, 1965, the Independent Voters Association held a memorial dinner in Alberta's honor. Louisville Safety Director Kenneth Newman spoke, saying, quote, "In the last few days, we have discovered some evidence which leads us to believe we are on the threshold of solving this mystery." This is a bold statement to make, and it really indicates to everyone that they're about to solve this murder.
And you have to wonder if maybe he got caught up in the moment. He's there at the memorial. He wants to give them some good news. And he says this because it sounds really positive. And, it's 2021 and we're talking about this case as an unsolved murder. So, spoiler alert, he's not right about the status of the investigation.
Right. And you would expect that if this is October 8th, you're thinking maybe the next day or that weekend or the next week they're going to make some big arrest. But no, in fact, it's not until November 18th, 1965, that Alberta's death is officially ruled to have been a homicide caused by drowning. So up until that point, what is that, three months after her body is found, that it's declared a homicide. Up until then, it's just a drowning. Now, on June 8th, 1966, about 7 months later, in a follow-up article by the Louisville Courier-Journal, it's reported that the investigation has zeroed in on 2 men and that the case had even been brought before a grand jury, but there was not enough evidence for the grand jury to return a true bill. Then the trail went cold until 1968. Let's talk about that grand jury and what a true bill is. So, a lot of you may think that prosecutors work in a vacuum, that whatever prosecutors want to do, they can bring charges. That is not true. There are constitutional protections. The prosecutor may decide to bring a charge, but that charge actually has to be screened or heard by a grand jury of your peers. So you've heard of the petite jury. That's who 12 angry men or women, 12 people who sit in judgment of a trial. But here, the grand jury is in secret. There's something called grand jury secrecy, and the prosecutors present their evidence of why they should get a true bill. A true bill just means the grand jury indicts. So it's not actually the prosecutor who indicts or brings charges. It's actually the grand jury who returns a true bill and signs the indictment. You typically don't know when a case has been presented to a grand jury at all, unless the grand jury indicts, because then the person is usually arrested and the case is unsealed at that point. Cases that go to the grand jury and die there, as in the grand jury does not return a true bill, does not indict, you usually never hear of because of grand jury secrecy. And you also don't hear about it typically because we don't want to be accusing people who the grand jury didn't even find probable cause to bring charges against. So here, and that's, by the way, the standard. That's the standard that the grand jury must find, not beyond a reasonable doubt. They just have to have probable cause. The grand jury did not have enough probable cause. Now, there's a saying that a lot of you have probably heard. It actually kind of offends me as a prosecutor, but nevertheless, there is a reason it's a saying and it's a joke. But people say that you can indict a ham sandwich because it's a very low standard of that you have to meet in order to get a true bill. So this is actually very significant, I would say, that the grand jury did not find enough evidence to return a true bill.
And I mean, this is just an example of how that's not true, right? I mean, it's what people say all the time. I mean, if a sandwich commits a crime, it can be indicted. I mean, I guess, but no, it's you hear this a lot. Grand juries are rubber stamped; they don't really do anything. It's just not true. I mean, number one, it's a tool for prosecutors in a lot of cases to investigate is one aspect of the grand jury, because you can bring people in under oath, ask them questions. They have to testify under penalty of perjury, hear what they have to say, lock down their testimony. And then, you don't have to move to try or to charge anybody at the conclusion of that grand jury. You can just continue it until later, until you have more evidence. I mean, that's one thing grand juries are good for. And the other thing is, yes, it is an initial test. It's not as high as a trial, certainly not, but it is one of those first things where it keeps prosecutors in line. It makes them think about their case. It makes them think about whether or not they have evidence. And in this case, it prevented two people from being charged. If you didn't have a grand jury, they might have just charged these guys. But the grand jury was a check on that. And it's a bad sign for the prosecution, because it is definitely true that if you walk in front of a grand jury and ask for an indictment and they say no, I mean, that's a big problem. I mean, you really need to go back and think about yourself and your case, right? Because the standard isn't that high. And if you can't even get a grand jury to say you have probable cause, the fact you were thinking about going to trial is an issue, because that's presumably the next step. If they'd said yes, you're going to try these guys. You're going to put them in front of a petite jury of 12 people and ask them to send them to jail for the rest of their lives. And you can't even convince a grand jury that you have a case. So,
and let's just, in case it's not clear to everyone, once the grand jury does not return a true bill, it's called no billing the indictment, the prosecutor can do nothing. They cannot bring charges. That's it, unless they represent with new evidence. And so those, again, I note that because a lot of people say, oh, prosecutor can do whatever they want. Not true. And it's not surprising that the trail goes cold until 1968, because the prosecutor can't really do anything at this point. They think they've investigated the case and they present it out to the grand jury, but it wasn't enough.
And I would love to know, I mean, and I don't even know, this was 1966. That was a long time ago. I mean, maybe if somebody filed some sort of FOIA request, I don't know how long is grand jury secrecy forever? Does it forever? This is bad that I don't know this.
I think it at least lasts someone's lifetime.
I know there's grand jury secrecy, but I mean, I just don't know. And it may vary. I'm sure it varies from state to state about that. I know there was a big fight over, I think, grand jury secrecy involving the Epstein case, for instance. I think that became like an issue, whether or not they could see those as part of the civil lawsuit. And I think this has come up before, now that I'm thinking about it, in civil rights cases, where people wanted, for historical perspective, to see grand jury deliberations. And it would be interesting, maybe if some of you out there in Kentucky want to take this on and take this case on, see if you can get the grand jury records from the grand jury in 1966. See if there's a transcript. I mean, that might be really interesting. You might learn a lot. Grand jury secrecy may block you from being able to do that, but it's worth looking into. We may look into that too. But if there's anybody in there listening from Kentucky, send us an email. Maybe we can work together on that.
I'm just speaking out loud. I don't know what it is in Kentucky, but typically I think there would have to be some judicial action to unseal things that are protected by grand jury secrecy for this exact thing, because these two men's identities are still protected. They've never been indicted. They have constitutional rights. So it doesn't, just as a core justice thing, it doesn't seem right that after 18 months, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, that all is just laid bare, right?
Yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a question in my mind about when enough time has passed, sort of the interest in the public of knowing, even from just a historical perspective, outweighs the secrecy. Maybe you're right. Maybe it never does. And maybe that's what the law says. I mean, I don't know. It's not something I've ever really looked into. It's a very, very interesting question, though. So we'll look into that and we'll get back to you on it if we figure it out. But I think Alice is probably right. I think the bar is probably much higher than I was thinking to be able to get to it. But let's look at it and see. Well, whatever the case, Alice is absolutely right. At this point, the trail does go cold until July 18th, 1968, when the police announced that they have found Alberta's purse. As we said earlier, Alberta's purse was missing. It wasn't found when she was killed. That was one reason they had to have someone identify her, because she did not have any identification on her. And it's actually found in the substructure of the Sherman-Minton Bridge, confirming what police had long suspected, which is that Alberta was thrown from the bridge. And apparently when she was thrown from the bridge, her purse got lodged in the substructure of the bridge itself. So the purse contained a wallet without any money in it, her identification, a few other personal items. In the article about the discovery, police stated that they had several real good suspects, but the police said that they had not yet been able to gather enough evidence to make a case against these suspects. I assume these real good suspects are the same men that they had tried to indict earlier, and you got to think they were hoping that finding this purse would be the thing that would put them over the edge, but unfortunately it did not.
So really quick, Brett, on this purse thing, and there's so little written about this, I haven't been able to find this. Did they state that the purse looked like it had been placed in the substructure, or it had been like hooked on as it flew off her body when she was thrown from the bridge?
It was the latter, that it had essentially, she was thrown off the bridge, the purse is falling. This part of the bridge sticks out, so it sticks out further than the bridge itself.
This is what I think is so interesting about it. It means that whoever threw her from the bridge did not remove the purse from her body in advance of throwing her off the bridge. And that could very well indicate that the purse may have been on her body if the accident of it getting lodged in the substructure didn't happen. In other words, it doesn't seem like whoever threw her from the bridge cared whether she was identified or not, and didn't care whether her body was found quickly or not.
That's a really good point. And even if they did remove it, they threw it over. I mean, she either had the purse still on her when she was thrown over, or they threw the purse after her. One of those two things happened.
They were not trying to remove the purse far from the body. Let's put it that way. For example, we've covered cases where, kind of like the Aisha Degree case. Remember, Aisha's body has not been found, but her backpack was buried, separated clearly from her body because her body wasn't in the same bag her backpack was found in. And that makes sense if a person wants to make sure that the backpack is not found with the body for identification purposes or what have you. It's very common to separate those two things to make it more difficult to identify or to find a body, but not the case here.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that may say something about the kind of suspects that you're looking for. So this is 1968. Police got real good suspects, but apparently it doesn't come to anything because we have a follow-up article in 1978. We've mentioned it several times. This is the article where the story changes considerably. It's essentially a follow-up article on various unsolved murders in Louisville, and Alberta's is one of the stories that features prominently. And then, essentially, this story just goes away and is forgotten in Louisville for a very long time. That is until all the way in 2010 when the police drop a bombshell. And we're going to talk about that bombshell next week. We're going to talk about the rest of this timeline, and then we're going to tell you some of the weird things about this case, and we're going to go through some theories about what we think might have happened. And at the conclusion of all of that, I hope, as I said earlier, if there's anybody out there who has any information about this case or thoughts on how we can advance this investigation, I hope that you will bring those to our attention and you will bring those to the attention of the Louisville police. This is very much still an ongoing investigation. So I hope you guys have enjoyed today. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, send us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all of the various social media. Hit us up on YouTube. Check out our Patreon page. Visit our store and buy a shirt. All the proceeds from that go to the Cold Case Research Institute, of which we are a big fan. Well, Alice, do you have anything else you want to say before we close up for today?
So much, but I'll save it for the next episode, because as we're talking about this case, and this is why I love talking about cases with you, Brett, as we talk, you point out things that I didn't see, vice versa, and I'm beginning to form a picture of what I think happened in my mind, and it's developing as we talk about the little bit of evidence that we have so far. So we hope you've enjoyed this so far, and we hope your mind is spinning as well, because we want to hear your thoughts. And if you know something, this case is currently still unsolved, please report it. Because as Brett mentioned at the beginning, time is running out. Memories are fading. Witnesses are dying. There's only so much time really left in terms of being able to get justice for Alberta.
And that's a really good point, Alice. And that's why I enjoy true crime as well. I mean, true crime is entertaining. We all have a lot of fun with this. We're all fans of this. We love the mystery. But I really think there's value in talking through this stuff and thinking about these cases together and listening to the facts. I really think we can come up with new things and new ideas that people have not considered yet. Well, that is all we have for today, but we will be back next week with the conclusion of this case. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Her to be guilty. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I honestly went into it just assuming we'd be like, "No, this is unjust," and then it's like, "Oh, nope, she totally did it."
Yeah, totally guilty.
And then, I'm telling you, the habeas petition, one of their arguments is that she didn't get a good defense because her lawyer had represented her husband in a gag order thing about the case, and since he had represented her husband, he was biased and he couldn't point out all the ways that her husband might have been involved, or he might have done it. It's that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Anyway, yeah, he's because of the gag order representation, he's not gonna go after him in trial if he can win a murder case. Today on The Prosecutors, she was a trailblazer. Can't say trailblazing. Trailblazing.
You're great. You're doing great.
You're doing great.